on that note, what does it mean to create a boundary? What is a boundary in your terms?
Yeah, so I define boundaries as the limits that we set for ourselves around what we will or will not do, will or will not tolerate, and will or will not accept. And so that also means that we have to have a sense of the delineation of where I end and you begin.
Gabrielle Bernstein, a role model for spiritual seekers.
This story of really being boundaryless. Nancy said to me backstage, if I couldn't have done that job if I wasn't as boundaryless as I was. This story of Nancy with Wayne Dyer, and I'm gonna let you tell the story because it's a beautiful story. I'm reading it and I'm visualizing it because I was probably there. I mean, I don't know, maybe.
Oh yeah.
And it actually brought a lot of sadness to me because it was remembering this part of you that, as strong and powerful as you were, now seeing you in this really profound strength, I can recognize what it means to have come this far. So I'd love to hear where you were and what happened and where you are now.
So, I was someone at that time really driven by external validation. And so I was chasing all the gold stars. And what happens when we chase the gold stars is no amount of gold stars will ever be enough to fill the void that is inside of us. So everything that we're seeking externally needs to be resolved internally first. But there's this hunger, there's this chasing, there's this, really what I would say is it's about putting your worthiness in someone else's wagon. So letting someone else be the determiner of your value and your worth. And my job as the event director at Hay House gave me a lot of gold stars, gave me a lot of accolades, gave me a lot of attention in that way. And so what it really becomes is like an addiction. It becomes chasing the high. And so, like you said, the motto was, I already did that, exactly. So on this one particular event that does open this book is I was on tour with Wayne Dyer. And we had done an event in Atlanta on a Saturday afternoon, and then the whole entourage, my team and his kids were with us. We did the event. We flew to Detroit, got to Detroit that evening, and we were preparing to do another event in Detroit on Sunday. And we had dinner, we all checked into our rooms, everything was going fine, and then around 10 o'clock at night, Wayne called me and said, I don't know where my briefcase is. And he wasn't blaming me, but he also was really insistent and emphatic that he absolutely needed that briefcase in order to go on stage tomorrow. And he's like, all my notes are in there for my talk, all my notes for my next book. There was some money in there. There were all these things in there that he needed, and he absolutely needed it. And he was in a little bit of a panic, quite frankly. And so he said, we have to figure out, we have to find this briefcase first of all, and we have to figure out how I'm going to get it. So again, 10 o'clock Saturday night, I'm in Detroit. The briefcase is somewhere else. I'm convinced that it's in the back of the van we took to the airport in Atlanta. So I call the van company, and they said, well, that van's not going to get back here till midnight. So midnight rolls around. And in the meantime, I'm on the phone with my travel agent who's on the West Coast, and we're trying to scheme about the way we're going to get the briefcase to Detroit once I even find it. And I call back at midnight. They go out, they come back, and they tell me the briefcase is not in the van. And I said, I just know it is. It's black, it's dark. I bet it went all the way from the front seat to all the way in the back seat. I know it's in the van. So I hold on again, and they come back to me, and sure enough, lo and behold, the briefcase was in the back of the van. So now I say, can you have someone fly it here? And they said, no, since 9/11, you're not allowed to fly someone else's stuff. And I said, okay, let me figure out what's happening, but at least we know where the briefcase is. And somewhere in the middle of the night, I had let Wayne know, I'll figure it out, I'll find it, go to bed, get some rest. And I was on the phone again with the travel agent. No one's going to be able to get it here. No FedEx, no air cargo, like no freight. Like there's just no, I'm getting a no. I'm getting the no for the answer. But I won't take no for an answer because I deliver. So at 4 a.m, I find myself on the way to the airport. And in the back of the taxi, I find myself booking myself a ticket. And there was only first class round ticket, and I thought, well, Reed Tracy, the president of Hay House, won't mind that I booked myself a round trip first class ticket, because that's all there was. And I booked the ticket, and I get to, I fly to Atlanta. The guy meets me in baggage claim. I grab the briefcase. I go back through security. And of course, because I just landed in Atlanta, they have to, do the whole pat down, and they're very suspicious. Why am I turning right around and flying back? And I'm on the plane now, getting ready to fly back. And I called Wayne, and I said, Wayne, I have got your briefcase. And he said, Nancy, where are you? I said, that is not important. He said, did you do something crazy? And I said, I will see you at the venue. So this was also the first time I'd given up sort of any control of my job, and I had let Molly, who now has my job, I gave her all the information of how to actually do my job for that event in the event I didn't get there. And right as I was pulling up in the taxi with the briefcase, Wayne is pulling up in his limo. And there are like thousands of people. I'm not joking. There's thousands of people around him. And he gets out of the car, and I walk toward him to hand him his briefcase, and he looks at me, and he's like, that? I don't need that. And he was pulling my leg.
Oh, my God.
And so what did I do? I flipped off the father of motivation.
Well, what would Boundary Nancy do today?
Right. See, this is the big difference. Because
what would Boundary Nancy do today?
Boundary Nancy wouldn't be doing it for the accolades and the approval and the validation. If I was to do something like that again, it would be coming from a very different place, and I would quite frankly say that who I am now would have said no.
Who you are now would have either said no or said, oh, I'm just booking first class, right?
Right, exactly.
Right.
Yes. But it's about it's about the
motivation.
undercurrent of the motivation.
Right.
What's having me to make this action?
Right. Correct.
Because it wasn't purely out of service to Wayne.
No.
It was out of this undercurrent of I want to feel valued.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So on that note, what does it mean to create a boundary? What is a boundary in your terms?
Yeah, so I define boundaries as the limits that we set for ourselves around what we will or will not do, will or will not tolerate, and will or will not accept. And so that also means that we have to have a sense of the delineation of where I end and you begin. Because what happens for those of us who have been people pleasers, peacekeepers, not rock the boaters, those of us who want to keep harmony at all cost, it comes at a very high cost. And it comes at a high cost to us. Because we don't have that clear delineation, so what we end up doing is we take more responsibility than is ours, and we actually have this illusion that we can make someone else okay, or that we can make someone else happy or make someone else mad, or that we have any control over anyone else's feelings. So I spent most of my life really managing the perception of others. I wanted to project this image of perfection to the world, and I was managing the perception of others, so I was giving other people a lens to see me through.
Right, and we were talking backstage about how in order to create a boundary, you said you want to know I am not willing to do this anymore. Getting into that grounded state that she's referencing, but how do we get there in a way that it lasts? That it's not just words, but it's an energy shift. Because in our experience, in order to create a long-lasting boundary and live with clean boundaries, we have to clean up whatever it was within us that made us boundaryless in the first place. So want to go there?
Yeah.
Let's go there.
Yeah. And I think, again, for those of us who identify as, it's the peacekeeping, the people pleasing, and all of that, but it's also really priding ourselves in our independence and our self-sufficiency and having no needs.
Right.
And so once we go to that place of having no needs, we're also erasing desire. So we're erasing even the inkling or the glimpse of a preference. And this is what starts having us acquiescing. And this is what has us saying yes when we want to say no. And so it's a big ship to turn around for many of us to actually start here to even reflect on what do I want as opposed to what does someone else want or even someone else want for me. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm working with a client and I'll ask him or her a direct question and he or she will answer about someone else.
Wow.
Will answer about their partner or whoever.
Right.
Because we're so uncomfortable with actually paying attention to our own needs. And then I hear from many people, even in terms of setting boundaries, isn't that selfish? Mm-hmm. And I'll be the first one to say that I am on the selfish bandwagon. I think selfish and self-care and self-love are three sisters whose job it is to support us. Absolutely.
Abraham Hicks always talks about how it's so powerful to be selfish.
Yes.
Putting your happiness and
Yes.
your well-being first is what will allow you to attract more of what you want into your
Yes.
life. It will allow you to show up even for others in a better way because it's a cleaner way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because really what I'm proposing here is that you actually consider yourself as much as you consider others. And really the ninja move is then how do you consider yourself even more than
Yep.
you're considering others?
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that you are not considering, it doesn't mean that you're disrespectful of others. It's not an either or, it's a both and. But, I use this analogy all the time. We are so good at setting the table with the fine china and the silver and the crystal and the big juicy steak or the big juicy tofu for everyone else. I gotta be PC. And yet, here we are in the kitchen in the dark, standing up eating the scraps and crumbs over the sink, and we think that's okay. And so I'm simply saying, hey, it's time to set yourself a seat at the table, and while you're at it, why don't you sit yourself at the head of the table?
So what if the men or women in this room are sitting in here and they're thinking, that sounds really good. I really would like that. But I don't believe I'm worthy of that. Or how could I possibly get there? Or maybe I could try it, but I'd feel like a fraud.
Right. So part of it
Read the
is-
book.
And so part of it is actually giving yourself some time and space to not be reactionary. Mm-hmm. Because part of what's happening is, again, when we're living in this place of people pleasing and feeling that lack of self-worth because we are letting someone else determine our worth, we're living an other-referenced life. Mm-hmm. And again, there's no delineation, where do I end and where do you begin? So I'm living other-referenced, and then I'm in reaction to what you're doing or not doing. And so part of it is actually being able to pull back and start here, even to the point of, I often talk about it in terms of like weather. What's my weather today? What's my weather system? And not get hooked into your weather system. Mm-hmm. Figure out what's going on with me first, which is really the opposite of codependence and the opposite of walking on eggshells. I'm not looking at you to regulate me emotionally. I'm starting to actually be able to regulate myself emotionally. And that is how we contact our own intrinsic sense of worth.
That's the key, what she just said. Learning how to regulate ourselves emotionally. This is my Oprah moment when I repeat back the big thing. You watch her, she does every day. Oh, regulate. But when we learn how to regulate our own energy, this is major work.
Yeah.
Then, to your point, we are no longer reliant on others to lift us up, to make us feel good enough, and we're no longer doing the boundaryless behavior to, in some ways, regulate them.
Exactly. Right. And then we're also, when we were able to do that, regulate ourselves this way, that's how we get to the state of neutral.
Right.
So that we're no longer in the trigger or in the activation. Because when we're in that trigger and activation, the first place we're going to go is into victim.
Defensive.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. Defensiveness and
Yep.
victim mode, which is very disempowering.
Is everybody tracking with this? You know, everyone's like, oh, I know. Yeah. When you have no boundaries, it's because you're reacting from a place of being triggered.
Yeah.
And it's triggering a place within you that probably is very young. You want to talk more about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially, you know, if we go back to, which is really the root and foundation of all of my work, and I can't say this without mentioning the late, great Debbie Ford.
I was just waiting for it.
Really going back to looking at what are our limiting shadow beliefs that were imprinted and instilled when we were very young. Likely under 10 years old. We weren't conscious of what we were deciding to believe about ourselves. These were the beliefs, these were the conclusions we started drawing about ourselves. So this is where all the I'm not good enough, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, there must be something wrong with me. I believe all of those beliefs funnel into some version of I'm not worthy.
Right.
Whether it's I'm not worthy of love, happiness, money, support, anything. Yeah.
Right. Mine was I'm not worthy of support. Well, it was a lot of things. There were a lot of things. And I can say there were a lot because today I am in neutral.
Yeah.
Real neutral.
If you like this video and you want to get more Gabby, check out the next one right over here.